Sometimes the loudest moments in life don't come from explosions. They don't come from screaming matches or dramatic exits. They come in silence. That terrifying, breathtaking silence that says more than 1,000 words ever could. A silence that creeps into the room and lingers. A silence that's not empty but full. Full of pain, full of wisdom, full of realization. And in that stillness, something happens, something shifts. Because that kind of silence doesn't come from weakness. No, it comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're no longer willing to put up with. It comes from reaching that breaking point where you finally stop asking for peace and become it. This video, it's not about screaming your worth. It's about realizing you don't need to. It's about walking away, not with chaos, but with calm. Not to hurt anyone, but to finally protect yourself. When you leave quietly, not because you're scared, but because you've grown, that's when you step into power most people will never understand. You become something different, something rare. You become untouchable, because real power doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It just moves. Quietly, clearly, without a trace of regret. They expected a meltdown. They expected you to beg, to break, to fall apart. But instead you smiled. Not because you were okay, but because you realized you didn't need them to be. You didn't cry. You didn't explain. You just left. And that exit, that silent exit, it wasn't an end. It was a beginning, a rebirth, a declaration. Not in words, but in energy. This isn't just a video. This is a reflection, a mirror of what you survived, of what you've become, and of what you're about to unleash. So, stay with me. It's about to get real. People love drama. They crave it like oxygen. It gives them something to talk about, something to stir, something to control. In their minds, strength is measured by who can shout the loudest, who can argue the longest, who can throw the final punch in a screaming match. But that's not strength. That's noise. Real power? It's calm. Real power doesn't need to prove itself. It walks into the room and shifts the air without saying a word. That's the kind of strength they'll never understand until it's walking away from them. Silent, solid, and completely uninterested in performing. When you choose to leave without warning, without noise, without theatrics, it's not because you're scared of confrontation. It's because you've grown beyond it. You've learned that arguing with someone who's already made up their mind is like shouting into an abyss. Nothing comes back but your own echo. You waste your breath, your time, your soul. For what? To prove something to someone who is never listening? No. You're done with that. Now you choose silence, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a boundary, a choice. Because peace is expensive, and you've been overpaying for far too long. That silence you give, it's not empty. It's overflowing with the words you didn't say, the pain you didn't return, the arguments you refused to entertain. It's full of all the things you carried and finally laid down. Choosing silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's self-respect. It's saying, this doesn't deserve a piece of me. And when they misread it, when they call it cowardice, when they twist it into guilt, let them. That's their chaos to hold, not yours. Your silence is not a question, it's a conclusion. And you owe no one an explanation for choosing peace over poison. They thought you'd fall apart the moment you stopped speaking. They thought silence meant surrender, that your quiet was a sign of weakness. They had no idea your silence was the final warning, the loudest answer you could have ever given. Because what they didn't understand is, silence doesn't mean you had nothing to say. It means you've already said everything. In your actions, your energy, your patience, your second chances, all of it. You tried. You reached. You gave grace again and again, hoping something would shift, but nothing did. So you made the hardest move of all. You disappeared. Not to prove a point, not to punish them, but to finally protect yourself. And that exit? It didn't come with slammed doors or tearful speeches. It came quiet, cold, clean. It came after nights of overthinking and days of holding your breath, waiting for them to see your worth. But they never did. So you vanished. And now they're sitting in that silence you left behind, waiting for the apology they thought was coming, the call, the message, the breakdown. But it won't come because you're done. Not temporarily, not emotionally reactive, but soul-deep, final kind of done. And that kind of done, it's untouchable. It doesn't seek closure. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't even seek revenge. It just walks with peace in its back pocket and no need to turn around. You're not angry. That would require energy. You're not bitter. That would mean you still care. You're empty of all that now. You cared for too long, and they took it for granted. Now your silence is a boundary, a wall, a warning, and the lesson they'll feel long after your footsteps fade. Here's the truth no one tells you until it's too late. What you walk away from defines you just as much, if not more, than what you choose to keep. Every step you take away from something that drains you is a step toward reclaiming the parts of yourself you forgot existed. It's not just about leaving people. It's about leaving patterns, cycles, mindsets. It's about recognizing when someone is pulling you down, anchoring your potential, suffocating your fire, and deciding that you refuse to stay buried. Every time you walk away from chaos disguised as comfort, you're telling the world, I'm done sacrificing myself just to be accepted. You are not built by what you survive, you are built by what you escape. Because anyone can endure, but only the brave escape with their soul intact. Every time you exit a toxic pattern, every time you say no to manipulation dressed up as love, every time you leave a room where your name is spoken only when you're not there, you grow. Not just externally, but deep, deep inside. In the silence, in the ache, in the emptiness that slowly fills back up with peace. And yes, they'll say you've changed. And you know what? They're absolutely right. You had to. Because staying the same would have meant sacrificing your potential just to make others comfortable. And comfort is where dreams go to die. Growth? It's ugly. It's lonely. It doesn't come with cheering crowds or standing ovations. It comes with quiet moments where you stare in the mirror and finally recognize the person you were always meant to be. And when you left, no tears, no goodbye, no warning. It wasn't an escape. It was evolution. Like a shadow slipping out of a burning house. Not running, not hiding, just done. And walking toward a new beginning you didn't need to announce. Here's the part most people will never admit to themselves. The loud exits, the dramatic ones, the yelling, the chaos, the final slams, they fade. They become just another story, another scene in a play full of broken egos. Because when someone leaves with fireworks, the noise distracts from the absence. But when someone leaves silently, with no words, no warnings, no fight, just cold, calculated distance, that absence lives in the room. It stays. It haunts. That's the kind of exit that never closes. That's the kind of goodbye that keeps echoing long after your footsteps are gone. You didn't scream. You didn't lash out. You didn't burn bridges or throw blame. You just vanished. Quietly. Decisively. And now they sit in that silence, slowly realizing that they're surrounded by the ghost of what they took for granted. Every quiet night reminds them of the peace you used to bring. Every moment of confusion is now louder because you're not there to make sense of it anymore. And the worst part for them, it's not that you left. It's how you left. With no explanation, no closure, no need to be understood. That silence, that was your final message. And that message was clear. I don't owe you my pain. I don't owe you my reaction. I don't owe you a single word more. It said, you knew what you were doing. It said, I trusted you. You broke it. I'm gone. You didn't make yourself unforgettable with anger. You made yourself forgettable with calm, with power, with restraint. And now the lesson plays on repeat in their head. Because when someone real walks away, the ones who were faking it, they finally feel the difference. Not in what was said, but in what will never be heard again. Let's strip away the illusion. Let's talk about closure. That sweet-sounding myth they sell you like a cure, as if it's something magical, as if sitting down for one final conversation will suddenly tie up all the pain into a neat little box. But here's the truth they don't tell you. Closure is a trap. It's a delay tactic wrapped in emotional guilt. It's designed to keep you stuck, waiting for an explanation that's never coming from someone who is never capable of giving it. You don't need closure, you need clarity, and most of the time, that clarity doesn't come from others, it comes from finally listening to yourself. Closure is realizing you already gave them 1,000 chances to do right. Closure is remembering the times you explained your hurt, your fears, your boundaries, and they ignored every single word. It's not a sit-down talk. It's the moment you accept that the door you've been knocking on is permanently locked. Not because they closed it, but because you finally stopped trying to walk through it. And in that moment, you realize the only apology you ever needed was the one you whispered to yourself when you finally chose peace over chaos. Not everyone deserves to hear your final words. In fact, most of the people begging for closure weren't even listening when you were screaming through your actions. They only noticed the silence after you're gone. But by then, you don't need to be understood. You don't need to be seen. Because closure isn't about being heard. It's about being free. It's about walking away without needing anyone to validate your pain. So forget the goodbye, forget the explanation. Your silence is your closure. And it's louder, sharper, and more permanent than anything words could ever deliver. Then it happens, quietly, slowly, but unmistakably. The glow. That post-silence, post-exit glow that doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It just begins to radiate from inside you like a silent sunrise. No announcement, no permission, just peace. A peace that nobody handed to you. One you built from the wreckage, one you fought for in the dark. After everything, after the disappointment, the betrayal, the disrespect, you begin to feel something you haven't in a long time. Yourself. You start sleeping better. Your breath feels lighter. Your mind isn't crowded anymore. And that laugh, it sounds different now. It's not covering pain, it's not surviving. It's real, it's free. And while you're quietly rebuilding, becoming better, sharper, calmer, there's somewhere out there wondering how. How did you do it without closure, without drama, without them? They can't understand, and they won't, because they thought your healing required their presence. What they never understood is that your glow didn't come from them finally showing up. It came from you finally walking away. You didn't rise because they came back. You rose because you never turned back, because you realized your healing was never in their hands. It was never going to be found in the apology you kept waiting for. It was in your decision to stop needing it, to stop chasing clarity from people who live in confusion. That glow they see now, that strength in your silence, it's not about revenge. You're not glowing to prove them wrong. You're glowing because you finally got it right. For you. And now it shows. In the way you move, the way you speak, the way you no longer flinch. That glow isn't noise. It's a silent declaration. You made it. And this peace, it's permanent. Let's talk about the Joker. Not the villain the world chose to paint, but the soul they refused to understand. They saw chaos, but never questioned what created it. They saw the smile and called it madness, but never looked closely enough to see the pain hiding behind it, or the clarity it carried. The Joker didn't smile because he was happy. He smiled because he was finally free. Free from pretending, free from masks that society forces us to wear. Free from the exhausting need to be understood by people who never really listened. His chaos wasn't born to burn everything down. It was born to break out, to escape a cage built by silence, shame, and forced obedience. You're just like him. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to obey and shrink. But the world didn't know how to handle that, so they labeled you too much, too intense, too honest, too raw. They wanted you agreeable, soft, quiet, someone they could mold into their comfort zone. But you gave them something else. You gave them truth. You gave them the version of you that doesn't apologize for breathing, and when they couldn't control it, when they couldn't bend you to fit their script, you didn't break. You didn't explain. You didn't yell. You smiled. That infamous Joker smile. Not out of madness, but mastery. Because the moment you stop performing for their expectations is the moment you begin living for your own purpose. You didn't vanish to hide. You vanished to rebuild, to rise, to evolve into something untouchable. That smile they feared, it wasn't insanity. It was clarity, power, liberation. Because silence, real silence, can't be manipulated. And that scares them more than any scream ever could. They thought you were easy to forget. They thought you'd fade like background noise. But now, you're the voice in their head, the lesson they keep repeating. Every time they look for loyalty, they remember yours. Every time they crave peace, they remember who brought it. Every time they sit in silence, they hear the echo of your exit. Because you didn't just leave, you transformed. And transformation is unforgettable. It's the story they'll tell in their head over and over, trying to figure out when they lost you. But the truth is, they never really had you, because you were always too real for their games. And now, they can't reach you. Not because you're hiding, but because you're too far gone, too focused, too evolved. Understand this. Your silence was never about hate. It was about clarity. You finally saw things for what they were. You stopped explaining. You stopped hoping. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit a space that never fit your worth. And that's not hate. That's truth. You didn't walk away to hurt them. You walked away to stop hurting yourself. You didn't disappear to punish, you disappeared to protect your spirit. Because when you realize how much energy you've wasted trying to fix what was never yours to carry, you start letting go. You start breathing again. And in that breath, you find your power. Not in noise, not in anger, but in distance, in healing, in becoming everything they said you couldn't be without ever saying a word. This wasn't your ending, not even close. This was your beginning, the beginning of something powerful, the rebirth of who you were always meant to be. Before the world tried to rename you, reshape you, reduce you. Before they tried to write a version of you that fit their comfort, not your truth. This was the moment you tore off every label, every mask, every expectation they forced on you and said, no more. This was the moment you remembered who you were, not just in your bones, but in your blood. You stopped living for their story and started living your own. So if you've ever left something or someone quietly and wondered if they noticed, if it mattered, if you made the right choice, let me say it clearly, yes, you did, because the loudest message you ever sent was the one wrapped in silence. If this message spoke to your soul, please like, comment, and subscribe to Dark Animus. Your silence is your power. Use it like a weapon. Use it like a crown. If this message reached something real inside you, then don't let it end here. Like, comment, and subscribe to Dark Animus, where silence speaks and truth is never whispered. Your story is just beginning. Walk away with purpose. Return with power.